Hello from Segovia. I'm about an hour away, north of Madrid. Right behind me is one of Segovia's main attractions, the aqueduct. The aqueduct was actually constructed back in 1 AD, which is about 2,000 years old. Can you believe that? 2,000 years old, and we still can see a piece of history of the Roman Empire. They don't use cement or anything, they're just stones and rocks being put together. And look at the size of it. Such a massive piece of art. One thing I noticed with this aqueduct is that it's 2 stories tall. As you can see, there's 2 arches. And I'm assuming this is because they are transporting the water, clean fresh water, into different parts of the city. This is the view of the town itself of Segovia. The mountain range in the distance is actually the border between Madrid and Castilla, which is where I am right now. This is the different province of the country. This structure in front of me is the city wall, or the old city wall. It has a quite interesting design. I've never seen one of these kind of designs before, but it's part of a wall. So you can see all the buildings here in Old Town. They're using kind of different designs, but it's repetitive. It's been repeated. Here's an example of the church with Romanesque architecture before the Gothic. So the Gothic one is like the Notre Dame cathedral. I have arrived at the main plaza or square of Segovia. And right behind it is the main cathedral. So unlike St. Martin Church, which I saw earlier, Segovia Cathedral is an example of Gothic architecture. So those little pillars, they're actually part of a structure, they're not decoration. And what I'm looking here is actually the side entrance of the cathedral, and I'm walking now towards the front entrance. So you can see the front of the cathedral, and you see that statue decorating on the gates. It's sort of quite different than the usual statues I see guarding the churches. Look at how beautiful this street is what I'm walking in. This is going away from the old towns towards the alcazar. So the alcazar is a palace, a royal palace, or a castle, you can say it. That view of farmlands and grass, and I see why they built castle in top of the hill now, because you can see it's a great viewpoint. You know that aqueduct that I was in the front before? So that actually connects underground towards the castle. The royal people, they actually get fresh water from the aqueduct. So it actually connects through the city, past the bathhouses, inside that place. I made it inside the alcazar now. Alcazar was built in the 12th century. So we have the medieval Romanesque era before the Christians took it over and built on top with the Gothic architecture. I can imagine back then you're in a war. Look at this. You're in a war with that kind of armor. Imagine how heavy it gets. We saw you meet the king back then. It's not as glamorous as other castles, but you can see in the medieval era, this will be quite something. Look, we get the depiction of the soldier. And the ceiling, the different. It's always the ceiling, isn't it? More of the arts design with the glass. So that woman there is Queen Isabella. Queen Isabella is probably the most famous queen in the Spanish history because she and her husband did Reconquista, where the Christians took over half of Spain from the Muslim. She sponsored Christopher Columbus' trip around the world and until he found the American continent. So that's how important it is that the Americans should be thankful to the Spaniards. The Hall of the Kings. So this is one of the most important rooms in here in Alcazar with a nice painting here. Big painting, and you can see those statues representing the history of Spain. So this room here is not just one era, it's multiple eras from the 12th century Romanesque, and then you've got the Gothic, and then you have the Muslim until the Reconquista, until what we see today, the chapel. I mean, it's quite self-explanatory what the chapel is for them to pray. But the fact that it's quite different than the usual chapel is not. I mean, the actual structure is quite simple, but you get all these paintings. Next to the chapel is the terrace. Of course, when I mean terrace, it means view of the city. Oh my God, look at that. How amazing is this? And look at this cannon. It's as heavy as probably a car. It's iron. I left the Alcazar now, it's right behind me. It's fascinating how one city, a small city like Segovia, can tell so much about one tiny part of Spanish history. To end my trip here in Segovia, check out this view of the city line, the cathedral, with its old town in the background. I'm at this ancient capital city of Spain named Toledo. So Toledo is a very important part of the Spanish history because it's where the Reconquista started. It's where the Christians took over the city from the Muslims, and as you can see, it's a very old city. There's the alcazar, there's the cathedral, and here's the main square of Toledo, and I'll be walking around to see what the city has to offer. This is the main street of Toledo. You can see the spire of the cathedral in the distance, but people are out and about. They're just doing their... Look, they're eating ice cream. I kind of want ice cream now. Just tried to have lunch, and my friend here, Valerie, is just joining me for lunch. And check out this, we can't even find a seat. And this is what I'm having. I'm having the carcamusa, which is the pork, and some peas is mushed together. And she's having the potatoes with some sauce. I'm not sure how, is that good? So just watch us have lunch as we try to navigate this crazy amount of people trying to go back and forth. So we just kind of have to fight for it. And unfortunately, we end up stuck in the bar. So it is what it is. Buon appetito. It's very good. It's similar texture to pulled pork, but then the soup is very rich in sauce, almost like a ragu. I finally got a table. I just want to say how I think it's worth it for this to be 14 euro. I mean, it's not seafood, but literally all of this food is just pork. The pork is just soup of the ragu. I think it's really worth it. Toledo is actually very popular too with blacksmiths, so it means that sword making, and that's why across the street I see all these vendors selling swords, like literally swords. Look, that's from Legend of Zelda. I know that symbol. See, there's actual like katanas, swords, guns, pistols, samurais, armors, shields, and knives. I've never been to a city where steel making and knife making and sword making is very commercialized, but the architecture here, I quite like it. Exorcish, Brujeria, witchcraft, Exposition Templario. So this is about exorcism. Wow, but Templars. Well, in the city is full of history and witches. I suppose it's a big part of old Europe, isn't it? You see that symbol down here? We're entering the Jewish quarter of Toledo. So Toledo is quite interesting because it's a mix of Muslim, Christian, and there's some Jewish as well. So this is used to be a wall around this area, separating the Jewish quarter from the main city. I know exactly we're in Jewish quarter because of this. Check this out. Look at that symbol. And back then, even the Jewish were persecuted by the Christians because the Christians forced the Jewish to give up their synagogues and convert them into churches. I really feel bad for the Jewish people because ever since the 15th, 16th century, they've been persecuted by everyone. And looking at cities around Europe with Jewish quarter, it makes me realize that the discrimination that the Jewish people has to endure by just existing, which is such a dark history in our society, really. I'm just looking at this pretty cute store. Shows all the nuns just making this bread called mazapan. Mazapan is like the cake. Look at this. They have different flavors too. I made it to main cathedral square. This is the Toledo's main cathedral. The spire is the tallest in the city. The cathedral was built over 250 years. 250 years. So this is across different eras. So inside the cathedral, there's multiple ornaments, different statues, different paintings, different artists. The main arches here, I was told that it's one of the tallest in Europe. You see the sun just comes in through that glass, beautifully decorated glass. So this is a painting of Saint Christopher, and it is said that if you stand here and go past Saint Christopher, you will gain 1 day of your life. 1 day of life per round. So I kind of want to go back and forth here. I mean, you know, you get extra day of your life. Why not? The main altar. I find it interesting that it's actually gated. So you see the gate is actually made of wood covered with leaves, golden leaves. So very thin layers of gold. And those little statues here in the railing represent our all sins. Right at the top were the biggest sins of humanity, where Jesus had to come down to the earth to redeem of our sins. Now inside the altar, this is even more interesting because, I'll let you see it. You see right there in the top, there's Jesus in the center, Mary, Virgin Mary right below him. But next to Jesus, there are two thieves that was crucified alongside with him. So I don't see in any other churches that you see the two thieves are in the altar. So it's really quite interesting to see the interpretation of this particular style of church. Next, let's go to the choir. This is the choir. You see the statue of Virgin Mary and Jesus smiling. And mind you, this was created in medieval Gothic era where none of the statues are actually smiling. So to see this style where one of the statues is smiling is really something quite different. This is the side of the altar. Look how heavily decorated these are. All the statues, decorations. Imagine how many years this would take. 250 years was just to create the church. See those decorations right there? It was created right after, so it's more than 250 years. It's crazy how long this takes. Now for the favorite piece, my favorite piece of this church. There it is. Angels and more angels. How cool is that? My God, this is one of the coolest piece of art I've ever seen ever. You can see here is Mary and Jesus with the angels, with the sun in the middle. And of course the rooftop. That's the oculus right there. Well, the sun lights in through the glass windows with all the paintings above it. It was said that the guy who created this did it over 12 years. It was one guy with his 3 sons. One guy created all of this. Such dedication. Right now I'm going towards the sacristia. So the sacristia is where the cardinals, the priests, pray and prepare themselves before the big mass going on. Oh my God. Wow. Who needs to go to Sistine Chapel? Oh my God. How cool is that? Oh my God. Wow. Just wow. My God, look at this. I make good shots just doing this because you can see the ceiling. Usually it's a terrible shot because you can all see the sky, but now you see all these beautiful paintings right above me. So I see why the priests need to prepare here because it's very, very holy. I really hope you've enjoyed my tour of Segovia and Toledo as much as I do. It's just really nice to see a little bit of a history of what it was like hundreds, if not 1,000 years ago, back then in ancient Spain. And we're just talking about 2 cities. It's insane to think that whole Europe is formed over thousands of years. And this cathedral is a great example of how our world has evolved into what it is right now. And saying goodbye from Toledo Church in front of St. Christopher because I want that extra year of my life. Ciao!